Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on adaptations for the 2021-22 academic year. We'll start the webinar shortly, but we'll give it just another couple of minutes for some further colleagues to join the webinar. Okay, I can see we've got a lot more colleagues joining us now, so we'll look to make a start. So for those of you that missed that very brief introduction, hello and welcome to today's webinar. And this webinar is for the adaptations for the 2021-22 academic year. Next slide please. Okay, so for introductions then, I'm Chris Tubbett and I'm the Product Development Team Manager here at NCFE, and I predominantly manage the team that develops regulated qualifications. And I've been quite central to the adaptations employed over the last academic year, and the adaptations will be carrying forward for the next academic year, which will be providing a high-level overview in today's webinar. Next slide, please. So in terms of the webinar session, purpose and aims, the purpose of the webinar is to provide an outline of our approach to adaptations for the academic year of 21-22. The agenda items we'll be covering in today's webinar are the context and VCRF consultation outcomes, where we'll provide a little bit of a background to the public health situation facing us for the next academic session and the VCRF consultation outcomes. We'll be giving an overview of the adaptations, where we'll be covering a few different areas, including but not limited to internal assessment, work placements, external assessment, performance table qualifications, our knowledge-only fallback option, which is applicable to our early years educator and early years practitioner qualifications, T-levels and functional skills qualifications. And as ever, we'll include some time at the end for any questions that you might have. Next slide, please. Okay, in terms of the government's intention this year is essentially that work placements, exams and assessments will take place in the academic year of 21-22, therefore moving away from results being based on teacher assessed grades. And this is because assessments and exams continue to be the fairest way for learners to evidence what they know, with all other things being equal. So the government recognises that, however, learners who will be taking exams and assessments have experienced significant disruption to their education, and that these learners may also need continued support in the face of any further disruption. So that's recognising mid-flight learners who may have been disrupted last year, who are moving from their first year to the second year of the study programme, but it also recognises that new learners will also face disruption this academic year in line with continued public health measures and restrictions. So at NCFE, we recognise that learners who have been taking exams and assessments in the 21-22 academic session will have had significant disruption to their education since as early as March 2020, and we remain committed in continuing to support learners in the face of any further disruption. Next slide, please. Okay, so just on this slide, there's a little bit further information around the context to continue talking around. So in this academic session of 21-22, under the VCRF regulatory framework, all qualifications were moved into category A. So that's regardless if they've been category B, B1, B2, if you're more familiar with those terms, that they were this year. For the next academic session, all qualifications will fall under category A. And what this means is essentially that all assessments are expected to continue, but we are permitted to continue to make adaptations to assessments and qualifications to take account for the ongoing impact of the pandemic, where we can do so without undermining the validity and reliability of our qualifications. So with this in mind, learners should only access permitted adaptations where they are needed to mitigate the impact of learning loss, continued disruption, or ongoing public health restrictions. This will be monitored through our external quality assurance processes to ensure that adaptations are not adapted wholesale as a starting point, but they're there to support to mitigate the issues with learning loss, disruption, ongoing public health restrictions. With this in mind, the qualification addendums will contain further information on what specific adaptations will be permitted per qualification for the academic year of 21-22, and this will be published in late August on our website on QualHub. Next slide, please. Okay, moving on to the VCRF, which is the Vocational and Technical Qualification Contingency Regulatory Framework, so a bit of a mouthful there, but essentially shortened down to VCRF, which is essentially the rules we must follow for the delivery, assessment and awarding of our vocational and technical qualifications. This regulatory framework was consulted on from the 12th to the 26th of July and was published on the 6th of August. At a high level, it proposes the following changes to the framework from the 1st of September 2021 for the next academic session. That being, all qualifications, regardless of whether they are Category B, B1, B2, or Category A, will fall under Category A for this next academic session. And this is the view that assessments will take place, but recognising that adaptations may still need to be mitigated and there to support with continued disruption of public health restrictions, or to support with other mitigating issues around learning loss or any further disruption. So this means that teacher assessed grades or tags will not be permitted in the next academic session, given the fact that assessments are expected to take place. So Category B will be switched off from the 1st of September 2021, meaning this will not apply to any new qualifications in this next academic session, but the provisions will remain in place for anybody submitting late teacher assessed grades or tags for eligible learners who were expected to complete in the summer or complete assessments last session within the eligibility window up until the 31st of August 2021. So it goes some way to recognise that some tags, teacher assessed grades, may be submitted late, and it makes provisions to support this. The outcomes of the consultation was published on the 6th of August, and where we are now is we are currently finalising our adaptation guidance, and this is where we'll be looking to publish this guidance for each of our qualifications prior to the 1st of September, so that centres and learners can have a clear view on what adaptations are permitted at the start of the academic session. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to move to this section of the webinar where we're going to be moving on, and we're going to go through our approach to adaptations at a high level in the next few slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so for internal assessments, there's a number of adaptations and mitigations that will continue, that were in place this academic year, but will continue to be in place for the next academic session. And some of these may have been BAU under normal circumstances as well, but we recognise that some centres may not have been accessing such provisions. So with that in mind, assessments that are internal can be undertaken remotely if needed. The external quality assurance can be undertaken remotely. Now, some centres prefer to do that face-to-face, and that may have been a business as usual sort of process, but for the provision for the next year, EQA, external quality assurance, can be undertaken remotely. The third point is around that alternative assessment methods or evidence are also permitted. So we recognise that this went some way to support learners and being able to complete within the timeframes, allowing that flexibility to change the assessment methods or change the types of evidence that we'll be submitting. Within that, we had in place a centre devised assessment guidance, which was in place sort of last session, and that's going to continue to be in place for the next academic session, so that where you need to change an assessment, there's some strong guidance there to support you on how to write your own assessments. And that may be supportive, for example, if a learner needs to self-isolate or is off for a period of time, and let's say they've missed a whole unit, you may need to write an assessment for 2 units and take more of a holistic approach. And the aim of the centre devised assessment guidance is to support in how to write those valid and reliable assessments. In addition to that, we will continue to permit the use of digital solutions for the capture and storage of evidence. Again, this may have been business as usual for some centres and learners, but for others, it might have been quite new. So we do provide, and we will be providing some further guidance on how to do that safely and reliably. In terms of what's going to be new this year, we've engaged with a partner, Video, to develop a platform which is NCFE Video, which is essentially a video observation tool to support with capturing remote practical observations. So we recognise that digital access to technology had provided some barriers in the last academic session. So we partnered up to provide this package, and there'll be some further information that comes out in the adaptation agendas on how you can access and review that platform and the benefits within. Second to that, we have developed some virtual reality software, which will be free, which is great news, to support with specific subject areas of pregnancy and also nursery, so that's early years and childcare. So it won't be applicable to all qualifications, but it will certainly go some way to those qualifications that it will apply to support with learning loss, remote learning, and even remote assessment in certain subject areas. Okay, next slide, please. So for work placements, there's lots of things that's going to continue in the main, and that's where we've put in place the use of simulation, the use of witness statements, the use of technology, where there's not stipulation that you must do a certain amount of hours. It's more about demonstrating competency. So all of these work placement adaptations that were in place this year, in large, will carry over as a continued adaptation into this next academic session. Now, where that pertains to a sector body, for example, we are working with the sector bodies, and we've started to engage early with them to seek approval of those adaptations to continue into the next academic session. And the details of what is permitted under the work placements will come out in the adaptation agendas that will be published later in August. And in the same respect, where adaptations around work placement, if they're demonstrating occupational competency and you're unable to undertake that assessment, then there may be a delay required, as we put in place this year. So that will carry over as well. And then where we've had our knowledge-only fallback option put in place for EYE, or early years practitioner or early years educator qualifications, that adaptation will continue to be an adaptation that will be available in the next academic session, but I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a couple of slides' time. So in terms of what's new for work placements, we have a suite of supporting teaching and learning qualifications, and particularly at level 2 and level 3, we recognise where there may be restrictions around access to undertaking work placements, certainly within education establishments, so they may struggle to get those observations in. So with that in mind, we've put in place adaptations to support with peer-to-peer observation as a last resort where they cannot access work placements, to enable learners in those qualifications to be able to complete as they work done. So the details around that for those supporting teacher learning qualifications will again be published within our adaptation agendas, which will be published later in August. And then similar to the internal assessment, we have obviously new adaptations around NCFE video. So there's that use of that video observation tool, which can support with capturing remote practical observations, which may be of some benefit for work placement observations as well, particularly around simulation or knowledge-only aspects. And then also the virtual reality access, as we've talked about, particularly for the nursery view one, where there may be some simulation, some virtual reality simulation that could support with remote learning loss, or even remote assessment to some point. Okay, next slide, please. So for external assessment, what we'll continue with is where we've moved assessments online and on demand, that will continue to be available in this format where that's been applied. In terms of exam opportunities, now typically we would have 1 to 2 exam windows in a given year. We are currently looking at making more exam opportunities available for centres and learners, and that will be published in our external assessment timetable on the 1st of September. What will also continue is where we have a task-based examination, for example, if that was over a 2-week period, we recognise that if the learner needs to self-isolate, they then may miss that opportunity. So what we've done is we've actually extended the duration of the windows to take account for situations where a learner might need to self-isolate, for example. So we've got extended duration windows as a continuation. And then for the synoptic assessments, particularly only relevant to those level 1, 2 VCERT technical awards, we will continue to update the briefs so they can be undertaken remotely. We'll review them against ongoing public health restrictions and make adaptations in line with that. But we'll also continue to remove the control conditions in which they would normally be completed, the set hours in which they would normally be completed within, and the removal of the set dates for submission. But what is also going to be new this year is we're looking to issue those synoptic projects earlier than what we would do. So normally we would release it in December. We're looking to release that a little bit earlier in November to help with the adaptations around synoptic assessment as well. So some great adaptations that we're going to continue to roll over. But what is new this year, but still under review, is the provision of advance notice of exam topics to support with learning loss. And we recognise this can go a long way to support where learners, particularly those who are mid-flight, moving from one year to the next, would have had significant disruption. And this will go some way to support that exam preparation, providing advance notice of the exam topics that will be assessed within the exam. So that's still currently under review, but the view from ourselves at this point is that by the 1st of September, when we publish our external assessment timetable, you'll be able to review that timetable for the qualifications that you are delivering and understand which one will have more exam opportunities, longer duration windows, which one will have the synoptic assessments applicable to, but also where the provision of advanced notes for exam topics is also being made available. So lots of things happening around external assessment that will continue, but the new area is the advanced notes for exam topics. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to performance table qualifications, where we have provisions around work placement that were in place this year. They will fall and roll over to next year, so they will continue to be in place. The same provisions around the synoptic project assessments that I've mentioned for those VCERT qualifications, where that was in place this year, that will continue to be an adaptation in the next academic year, enabling them to be completed remotely and more closely like internal assessments. The provisions around external assessments, which I've just talked about on the previous page, will also apply to performance table qualifications. So that's additional exam opportunities, that is extended window durations, and where possible, which is still under review at present, is the provision of advanced notes for exam topics. What is new this year, though, is the number of resit attempts. So as we put in place in the 2020 and 2021, we will permit up to 2 retake opportunities for external assessments for all 4 categories of performance table qualifications, and that's applied generals and tech levels at level 3, but also technical certificates and at level 2, and the technical awards at level 1 and level 2, namely referred to as VCERTs. So with that in mind, assessment opportunities where students receive results based on teacher assessed grades, otherwise known as tags, and centre assessed grades, tags from the previous year, do not count towards these retake opportunities. So it's essentially a clean slate, whereby you'll have your normal opportunities to sit the exam, but you'll have a further 2 retakes to sit the assessment. So additionally, it's essentially what you would have in a normal year. You would have your first opportunity, then you would have 1 retake, and that's a particular stipulation for performance table qualifications. In this academic year, you're going to have 2 opportunities to retake that assessment, where the external assessment windows permits the number of opportunities to be undertaken. So that's it for performance table qualifications, but again, lots of adaptations sort of being rolled over to this next academic session. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have a knowledge-only fallback option, which we've put in place this year, particularly for our early years educator and early year practitioner qualifications, where we recognise that where learners were unable to access work placements and complete the set requirements, where we were unable to put in place adaptations because of the occupational nature of them, we recognise that not all learners would progress to the employment, that some learners would progress to further or higher education, and therefore, how much weight was placed on the completion of the work placement to enable them to complete. So what we put in place is a knowledge-only fallback pathway within those qualifications, so that for those learners who want to progress into further or higher education were able to drop down that pathway and essentially complete on the knowledge-only criteria to support progression to the next steps of their lives. So that same adaptation will continue into this next academic session. So what we will put in place is some mitigations to support with that adaptation being sort of rolled out to this next academic session, and that's where we don't expect that new learners to be directly enrolled onto the knowledge-only pathways, as they won't be available for new registrations. So your learners will have to be registered onto the full program of study, and essentially it'll be an option where a learner can transfer to should they need it at a later date. And the reason for this is that this restriction mitigates the risk of learners enrolling direct onto this pathway, and it essentially encourages providers to enroll all learners in the full program of study so that they exhaust all opportunities to access those work placements. And the fallback option will only be available from May onwards and later in the academic session. And as I said, that's to ensure that we've exhausted all attempts to access or complete work placement activities first. And essentially, the fallback option is used as a last resort to support those learners who are not progressing to employment but wish to progress to further or higher education. Now, one thing to really note this year is given in 2021 performance table measures were relaxed this year, they weren't essentially in place. In the next academic year, performance table measures will be going ahead. And with that in mind, when we've had this adaptation approved by the Department for Education, one of the measures that they put in place was that it will not count in performance table measures. And that's because it doesn't carry all the same characteristics as the full qualification would do to count in performance tables, because it's essentially a knowledge-only option. So that is one point that is new this year, that you need to be very mindful of that if you are considering that transfer onto the knowledge-only fallback option, that it's just a recognition that it won't count in performance table measures. So we're going to make this very clear in our adaptation guidance on our website and any communications around this, but that is something sort of right here, right now, that we're just making centres fully aware of to consider within that option. Okay, next slide, please. So for T-levels, the arrangements for T-levels set out in the VCRF consultation outcomes are in line with other VTQs, other vocational technical qualifications, in that exams and assessments should go ahead in 2021 to 2022. Now, it's worth noting that all other adaptations, as I've mentioned within this webinar, are not applicable to T-levels, in the sense of the statement above that all assessments, exams and assessments should go ahead in 21-22. But we are continuing to consult with the Institute and Ofqual and other award organisations who are delivering T-levels on the arrangements for T-level qualifications, and we'll publish any updates on adaptations as soon as they are confirmed, if any new adaptations come through. Next slide, please. Okay, as with other vocational and technical qualifications, we expect all functional skills qualifications, exams and assessments to go ahead in the 21-22 academic year, and the full subject content to be taught across all levels. So given their size and focus on assessing underpinning skills and knowledge, the exams and assessments are not structured in the same way that permits the reduction of content or streamlining of assessments. And it's our expectation that we will continue to put in place adaptations related to the delivery of functional skills exams and assessments where necessary, as we did in 2020-2021. So examples of adaptations for last academic session included, but was not limited to, remote invigilation, on-demand paper-based solutions, assessment variation process to allow for additional or alternative test centre locations, and additional flexibility for exam dates and windows for assessments. And we expect all these adaptations to continue to be available to support with the delivery of functional skills qualifications and exams, given that exams and assessments are expected to continue to take place in this next academic year. So for the full details on what adaptations are permitted for functional skills, that will be published in the adaptation addendas on our website Call Hub later in this month of August, but will certainly be available to you prior to the 1st of September. Okay, next slide, please. So some key dates and website links to be mindful of is the consultation outcome was published on the 6th of August, where we communicated the outcomes of this to our customers the same day. And you can access more information on this using the link that you can see on the screen now. And we also published our adaptation blueprint the same day, which outlines our adaptation approach by different assessment methods and types, which can access more information on this, again, by using the link on this slide here. We'll be publishing the individual qualification-specific adaptation addendas on our website, Qual Hub, where you can view each of these qualification-specific guidance for the next academic session. And we'll be doing that over the 23rd to the 26th of August. So some qualifications might come up a little bit early, but that's just the time scale that we're working through to upload all those adaptation guide documents on our website. And then our external assessment timetable will be published on the 1st of September, which will include details on external assessment dates, additional information for our next academic session. And that's where you'll be able to review your qualifications and see where we've been able to put in place the provisions of additional exam opportunities, extended windows, and the advanced notice of exam topics, which is currently under review, but where we are able to put that in place, it will be included in that external assessment timetable guidance. Okay, next slide there, please. Okay, so a lot of information we've gone through there, but hopefully that's been helpful. I am just going to see if we've got any questions that have come in. So I see there's a few questions that have come in. So if you bear with me whilst I review some of these questions so far. So I'll see one of the first questions is what is NCFE VO? Okay, so this is where we've partnered up with a company called VO who offer a digital solution for video enhanced observations. That's what VO stands for. And it's a secure video online platform for the recording and tagging of videos, essentially. And it offers a more efficient way to mark NCFE skill assessments, which can be undertaken remotely. And it empowers students and teachers by providing a simple and secure way to capture observation-based assessments. That saves time while preparing students to pass skill-based assessments. And the platform allows you to digitally record and mark practical assessments online and remotely. So for further details on that, you'll be able to review links to that platform that offer within the adaptation guidance, which we published this month. But you can also visit the website, which is essentially veo.co.uk/NCFE for further information. So hopefully that answers that question there. Next question, where can we get more information on virtual reality platforms you mentioned? Yeah, sure. So to support with learning loss, we've developed free virtual reality online resources in the subject areas of pregnancy and nursery care, which can be accessed from our website by simply searching for the titles of the platforms, which is Nursery View, and that's spelled VUE, all as one word, or Pregnancy View, again, spelled as all one word. And if you just search that on our website, you'll be able to find more information on both those platforms. But as I mentioned, they are free and can be used on a PC desktop and can support with lots of things around learning loss, homework tasks, remote learning, or even remote assessment where it's applicable, using simulated activities via a virtual reality environment. So more information on both these platforms will be included in our adaptation guidance published later in August, where this is applicable to the qualification subject area. So hopefully that answers that question. Just moving on to the next one. Are the work placement adaptations you mentioned approved by sector bodies? So good question, and yes, they are, is the short answer. So we've engaged very early with sector bodies to work through the adaptations for work placement to agree what adaptations can and cannot be carried over into the new academic session. And in the most, all work placement adaptations will carry forward with some minor amendments where we've taken on board customer feedback throughout to improve these even further for the new academic session. So where work placement adaptations are governed by sector bodies, will clearly state this in the adaptation addenda for each qualification and ensure the links to the specific sector body guidance is included if that's applicable too. So in short, absolutely, we've engaged very early with sector bodies, but any adaptations that are governed by a sector body will have been approved prior to us publishing that guidance on our website, which is due later in August. We see there's a couple of questions here around the the knowledge-only pathway. So just picking up the first one there. Why is early years educator and early years practitioner knowledge-only pathway fallback option not available for new registrations or to transfer until later in the year? Okay, so we did cover this in some earlier slides, but I'll just go through this again in a little bit more detail. So as the EYE and EYP are both governed by the Department for Education, this is an adaptation we've needed to seek approval for to carry forward into this next academic session. With that in mind, we've had approval to do so, which is great news, with the same conditions we had in place last year to also carry this forward. So it's not new that we don't allow new registrations or make it available late in the year. That is the same adaptation that was in place this year and that will carry forward. So moving through that, then I think essentially the reason that the transfer option is not immediately available is to ensure that learners and centres exhaust all opportunities to access and undertake work placements. But it provides the reassurance that where we there'll be a safety net there for learners to fall back to should they need it and should they not be able to access or complete work placements for those learners who particularly want to progress on to further or higher education. So hopefully that answers that question. But let's see, we've got another one. Why will the knowledge-only pathway not be included in performance table measures? Okay, so the knowledge-only pathway will not be included in performance table measures since it does not demonstrate all the necessary characteristics of a performance table qualification as confirmed by the DFE when approving this adaptation to be available as an option in the next academic session. So something you really need to consider and be aware of when you're looking at this as an option for your learners to transfer on should you need it. I think we've got one final question here on that knowledge-only fallback option. So will EYE, EYP fallback options still carry UCAS points? So yes, that's correct. We've had approval from UCAS that the same approach will be applied this next academic year as it did last year, and that the fallback option will carry UCAS points for to serve its purpose to enable learners to progress on to sort of higher education. So hopefully that answers that question. Got time for a few more questions. So can you tell us more about the support teaching and learning adaptations you mentioned? Yes, absolutely. The STL, or support and teaching and learning, as it's more well known for, is we have got a group of qualifications at level 2 and level 3, and we recognise that access to work placements to educational establishments may continue to be restricted for teaching observations to be undertaken. So therefore at level 2 and level 3, we've put in place further adaptations to allow peer-to-peer observations as a last resort. And further guidance on this will be providing those qualification-specific adaptation addendum guidance documents, which is going to be published on our website later this month. Okay, next question. How will I know if the qualification I'm delivering will have extra exam opportunities? Okay, so yeah, really good question. And where we can put additional exam opportunities in or extended window assessments and advanced notice of exam topics, this will be communicated in our external assessment timetable, which will be published on our website no later than the 1st of September. So you'll be able to know right at the start of the academic session where them provisions will be put in place and available. Okay, we've got time for one more question. When will we see adaptations for T-levels published? Okay, so the outcomes from the VCRF consultation, which was published on the 6th of August, stated that the arrangements for T-levels are in line with VTQs and that exams and assessments should go ahead in 21-22. Therefore, all of the adaptations mentioned within this webinar are not applicable to T-levels, as I've already mentioned sort of earlier, but we are continuing to consult with the Institute of Qual and other awarding organisations who are delivering T-levels on the arrangements, and we'll publish if there is any further adaptations on our website as soon as possible. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide, but don't worry about any questions not answered. We'll look to draft a response to these and we'll send out with the recorded webinar afterwards to those that have registered. But if I just want to sort of conclude the webinar with thank you for listening to this webinar, and we hope you found it helpful. But if you'd like more information or support, then please check the approach to awarding on the 2021-22 webpage link, which you can see on the screen now, or you can email or call our customer support team with details on the slide, and that's at customersupport@ncfe.org.uk, or you can call us on 0191 239 8000, or alternatively you can talk to your NCFE account executive. Next slide, please. And finally, if I just take the opportunity to say from everybody and everyone at NCFE, please stay safe and all the best. Thank you.